Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Soulfly Chama out October 24th on Nuclear Blast. The album has 10 tracks, 33 minutes in length, and this is the band's 13th full-length studio album. They are a Brazilian-American metal band. Now, when it comes to the design of this record, I want to start off by saying that I love the attitude, I love the vibe, I love the fluidity, and how dynamic this album is from the beginning all the way to the end. It's a very punk-driven record. It has a lot of punk attitude in it. In the overall length, in the length of the songs, in the style of the songs, in the sound, in the lyrics. I just love that more punk vibe that this album puts forward at every single turn. Now, the part about the design of this record that I think could have been done slightly better is Soulfly XIII. I love the track. It's an instrumental song. I know it's celebrating the 13th record. I get where this song is coming from. I just don't get where it's placed. It's the second last track. I understand being an outro of the previous song and allowing for a cliffhanger before Chama comes in, almost trying to set up a bigger bang, a bigger payout with a song like Chama at the end of the record, which to me is the best song on the album, the biggest sounding song on the album. So I can see from that standpoint why put Soulfly XIII in that spot, because it works. It does segregate the last track, Chama, off of the overall design and the overall fluidity of the record and gives it a very independent pedestal for it. But the dynamic of the record is so engaging, it's so fluid. I almost wanted to see a reverse of these tracks, have Chama come in perhaps at number 8 and then have Soulfly XIII close off the record, because I just feel like it's a perfect outro. It's a perfect way to end off an album, considering that the album has an intro track that gets everything started. So I just would like to see some commonalities or the album kind of going full circle, using an intro to bleed into the second song of the album, and then using Soulfly XIII as the outro that bleeds out of the previous song of the record. That would give the album a little bit more of a uniformity. It wouldn't make it as chaotic, but I understand the way the album is put together, and I also see the merit and the value in doing it so, because it does give Chama a little bit more of its own pedestal, of its own room to breathe. I still would have changed it, but I understand it either way. I just wanted to mention this because to me that was the only little glitch that I found listening to this album from an overall design perspective. Now, once you get into the sound of this record, the album really feels like a catch-all of everything that Max has ever worked on. Everything from Nail Bomb to Go Ahead and Die is represented on the sound of this album. Like I said earlier, this is a very punk-driven, filled with punk attitude style record. But they brought in elements that are not necessarily punk in order to make the album a little bit more robust, in order to make the album a little bit more richer, and give the album a little bit more of a bigger sound and a bigger presence. They brought in some crossover thrash elements, obviously some death metal elements, some new metal, some thrash metal. There's a little bit of everything, like I said, that Max has ever worked on represented on this record. Even some industrial influences from bands like Fear Factory. I can find some elements throughout this album. So it's an album that's very rich sound-wise, but at the same time it presents that richness in a very stripped down manner, which allows for that punk attitude to come to the surface regardless of what's driving it underneath it. It doesn't matter if the track is more crossover, more thrash, more groove, more whatever. At the end of the day, the attitude that the track has is always going to be very punk. Attitude in the lyrics, attitude in the vocal performance, attitude in the overall sound, and the essence that you get from it. I love that aspect about the record because it really sets this album apart as far as being a Soulfly record. And when you look at the two predecessors, when you look at Ritual and you look at Totem, this album is nowhere near close to what those two records offer. This album stands a little bit on its own, feeling, like I said, a catch-all or a greatest hits, if you will, as far as sound and attitude is concerned, paying homage to some classic records that Max has been involved in. And I look as far back as Nail Bomb, and I look as more recently as Go Ahead and Die, perhaps as the two projects that, while being very far apart as far as time is concerned, when it comes to the attitude that they provide, I think they are a lot closer than what a lot of people give them credit for. So this album is a little bit of all of that, all of the above, represented in a single spot, in a single place. Now, as far as individual elements, man, I love the guitar sound on this album. I think it's excellent for that attitude that the record has. Very thick guitar sound, very impactful, very heavy, very aggressive, but never losing a lot of the grooviness that's always been an element of Soulfly. And it's important, regardless of how many influences you bring in or how much attitude you give a record, it's always important to keep some of those more traditional DNA elements there so that you don't completely disconnect from the past of the band and from what made the band what the band currently is. And I felt like the guitar sound on this album definitely helped bridging those gaps. Now, the other element of the sound that I really enjoyed on this album were the drums. Man, the drums sound phenomenal. From the more traditional tribal sounding elements that we saw on albums like Roots, for example, Totem, even Cavalera Conspiracy records have had a lot of that more tribal sound. This record brings a lot of that into the forefront, not consistently from beginning to end, but it brings a lot of those elements, allows the drum sound to be wide, to have big presence, to really define a lot of the heaviness, but also a lot of the size of these tracks. I love the cymbals. The cymbals have a great splashing sound that really permeates throughout the tracks. But overall, the drums on this album are definitely some of the best that I've heard on a Soulfly record in a very long time, because they felt more organic, they felt more in the moment, more natural, if you will, in matching that punk attitude really well. Very carefree, and I think that comes across not just in the playing, but the impact that that sound has on the tracks themselves. Now, when it comes to Max and his vocal performance, I would say it's vintage. What you would come to expect from Max on a record is exactly what you're going to get here. I felt overall this album uses a lot of reverb on the vocals. I like it. It's a little bit old school. I really enjoyed it when Max did that with Sepultura, for example, in the early 90s, in albums like Arise, or even Beneath the Remains. That style, that overall approach works really well. It adds to that street, it adds to that punk, it adds to that attitude aspect. It also makes the vocals feel a little bit wider, a little bit thicker, a little bit more impactful, creates more movement within the vocal performance. So that is something that I noticed throughout the entire record, but something that, while being consistent, matched really well whatever the vibe of the individual songs was all about. And when you put all of this together, you have a very different, I would say a very unique Soulfly record here, and in many ways a record that really catches not just the history of this band, but the history of Max and everything that he's done in a very cool way, presented with a lot more punk, a lot more attitude. When you look, like I said previously, either at Ritual or Totem, albums that perhaps had a more defined death metal influence, specifically Ritual had a lot of death metal influence in it. This album, in my opinion, has a lot more punk in it, and I really enjoyed the overall vibe and the different twist that this album offers when you look at the discography of Soulfly. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I will start off with Ghenna, featuring Michael Amott from Arch Enemy on guitars. This is a crazy guitar sounding track, but it's also a very crazy track all around. Super dynamic, but also super chaotic. It's a track that just goes all over the place. For a song that's under 2 minutes, it's unbelievable the amount of shit that they packed on this track. It just blows your mind. A lot of movement, a lot of different guitar sounds, a lot of different guitar textures, a lot of aggressions. The vocals really add to the overall aggression and brutality of the track. It has an outstanding solo section, but this track is really about the chaos that exists within it, control chaos, if you will, and the overall guitar performance and the overall guitar playing is top level, top notch on this very short, impactful track. Then you have Favela, Dystopia. This is definitely a more groovier, a more crossover thrash metal style song, because it has a very crossover thrash style riff and style guitar sound. The vocals match that sound and that vibe really well. It's a track that feels a lot more streamlined, definitely not chaotic, straightforward. What you get at the beginning is going to be what you're going to get all the way through, but that's normally the case with crossover thrash. It's more about the aggression, the attitude of the song, the great grooviness of the riffs, and then the songs tend to stay very streamlined throughout, and that's exactly how this song plays out. Last on the record, last on my list, but definitely not least, my favorite song on the entire record, Chama. This is the closing track, like I said earlier in my review, and this is one of those that's an absolute beast. Super heavy, super thick, incredibly layered, incredibly textured, a song that sounds massive. This song is designed not to be played at clubs, but to be played at big stadiums, big arenas, big festivals. It has that sound capability to it to just not only fill a room, to fill a stadium. It's just a massive song. I love the chugginess on the guitars, great guitar chugs throughout this entire track. The vocals are over the top aggressive, a song that has incredible depth, and that adds to that overall texture that it offers. It's just a colossal sounding song in size, in delivery, and what it offers, and how much it has for the listener to digest. Just a massive, biggest song on the album. Title of the album, closing the album. I mean, this is an exclamation mark if I've ever seen one. This is it, Soulfly with Chama, once again out October 24th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.